are you going? Get back here!
Let it go, Zira. It's time to put the past behind us.
I'll never let it go!
Did you ever wonder why Zira hated Simba so much? Picture this, a young lioness hidden in the shadows of Pride Rock, witnessing a shocking event that would change her life forever. We've uncovered evidence that suggests Zira's hatred began long before Scar's defeat. What if her family suffered a terrible injustice at the paws of Mufasa, planting the seeds of revenge in her heart? This traumatic experience set Zira on a dark path to villainy. We're about to reveal the shocking truth behind her transformation, and it's not what you might expect. Picture this, young Zira, eyes bright with curiosity, peering from behind a rocky outcropping. She's watching other cubs play, their laughter echoing across the savannah. But Zira's not joining in because she can't. Her family lives on the outskirts of the Pride Lands, always keeping to themselves. One night, as stars twinkle overhead, Zira overhears her parents talking in hushed tones. "We used to be part of the Pride," her mother says, voice heavy with sadness. Before it all went wrong." Zira's little ears perk up, desperate to know more. The next day, Zira can't contain her curiosity. She asks her parents why they aren't part of the Pride, why they live alone. Her father's voice is stern. "Forget about it, Zira. We need to focus on surviving. That's all that matters now." But how can Zira forget? Every day is a struggle. We watch as Zira and her family search for food and water, always staying far from other lions. The young cub doesn't understand why they have to work so hard just to get by. As Zira grows, she notices something else. The way other lions look at her family, there's fear and disgust in their eyes. But why? What could her family have done to deserve such treatment? Determined to make friends, Zira approaches a group of cubs one day. Her heart pounds with excitement. Maybe this time will be different. But as soon as they see her, the cubs scatter. "Run," one shouts. "It's the outcast! Don't let her touch you!" Zira's left standing alone, confusion and hurt swirling in her chest. As she trudges back to her family's den, a thought occurs to her. What if her family's trouble started long before Scar took over the Pride Lands? That night, as Zira curls up to sleep, her mind races. She dreams of a day when she'll be accepted by the Pride, when she can play with other cubs without fear. But little does she know, things are about to get much worse. The next morning dawns hot and dry. The Pride Lands are in the grip of a terrible drought, and food is becoming scarce. Zira watches as tensions rise among the lions. Fights break out over the smallest scraps of meat. And then she hears the whispers. "It's them!" an old lioness hisses, glaring at Zira's family. "They're bad luck. Ever since they came, things have gone wrong. We should drive them out." Zira's heart races. Drive them out? But where would they go? The Pride Lands are the only home she's ever known. She looks to her parents, hoping they'll stand up, defend themselves. But they just lower their heads and slink away. That's when something changes in Zira. A spark of anger ignites in her chest. Why should they have to leave? They haven't done anything wrong. She decides then and there that she'll prove herself. She'll show the Pride that her family isn't bad luck. So Zira starts training. We watch as she practices her hunting skills, pushing herself harder and harder. She's determined to catch the biggest, juiciest prey and bring it back to the Pride. Then they'll have to accept her family, but every time Zira approaches the Pride with her catch, they turn their backs. No matter how hard she tries, it's never enough. The other lions still shun her, still whisper about bad luck and outcasts. And then one fateful day, everything changes. Zira sees cubs playing near the watering hole. This is her chance. If she can just join their game, maybe they'll see that she's not so different after all. She approaches slowly, trying to look friendly, but as she gets closer, one cub spots her. "Look out!" he yells. "It's the outcast!" The cubs scramble to get away, but in their panic, one slips. He tumbles down the bank, straight towards Zira. Without thinking, Zira reaches out to catch him, but her claws are out. She's still in hunting mode. As she grabs the cub, her claws dig into his skin. He lets out a cry of pain and fear. Suddenly, everything goes silent. Zira looks up to see the entire Pride staring at her in horror. The injured cub is whimpering, blood seeping from the scratches on his side. And just like that, Zira's worst fear comes true. She's not just an outcast anymore. In their eyes, she's a monster. The Pride Lands were about to face their greatest challenge yet, and little did Zira know that her world was about to be turned upside down. What if this drought wasn't just a temporary setback, but a catastrophe that would push every animal to their breaking point? As the first signs of the impending disaster appeared, no one could have guessed how it would change Zira's path forever. The once lush savanna began to wither away, its vibrant greens fading to dull browns and yellows. The watering holes shrank to mere puddles, and the earth cracked under the relentless sun. Animals of all kinds grew desperate, their eyes sunken and ribs visible through their skin. But for Zira's family, already struggling on the fringes, this drought was a death sentence. As the situation worsened, tensions among the lions reached a boiling point. Hunger and fear made them irrational, and they started looking for someone to blame. They turned on Zira's family, whispering that they were cursed and had brought the drought upon them. Young Zira, her heart still full of hope, couldn't understand why everyone hated them so much. She wanted to help, to show the pride that her family wasn't bad luck. So Zira did something dangerous. She started trying to hunt on her own. Can you imagine a small cub, barely old enough to leave the den, stalking through the parched grasslands? She was determined to prove her worth, even if it meant risking her life. But every time Zira managed to bring back food, the other lions would accuse her of stealing from them. It didn't matter that Zira had spent hours stalking her prey, or that she'd risked being trampled by desperate herds. In their eyes, she was nothing but a thief. As the drought dragged on, Zira's parents became more bitter and angry. They'd sit in the shade of their small den, away from the judging eyes of the pride, and fill Zira's head with stories of how unfair life was. "We used to be respected," her mother would say, her voice low and resentful. "Now look at us, treated like scavengers in our own land." The drought was bringing out the worst in everyone. Lions who had once been friends now fought over the smallest scraps of meat. Families turned against each other, accusing their neighbors of hoarding resources. Zira watched as lions she had once admired became selfish and mean. Something inside her began to change. The bright-eyed cub who had dreamed of being accepted started to disappear, replaced by a young lioness who was learning to be hard and unforgiving. As she watched her family suffer, as she felt the sting of rejection over and over again, something inside her snapped. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface began to bubble up, hot and fierce. But Zira didn't just get angry, she got smart. She started watching the other lions more closely, learning their weaknesses, their fears. She began to understand that in this harsh new world, strength was everything, and if she couldn't be accepted, she would make sure she was feared. As the days stretched into weeks and the weeks into months, the Pride Lands became almost unrecognizable. The once mighty river was reduced to a trickle, and the herds that had once roamed freely were now just scattered groups of the strongest survivors. And through it all, Zira watched and waited, her anger growing with each passing day. Picture this, Zira watching from the shadows as a group of cubs played together, her heart aching with longing. She's never been part of their games, never felt that carefree joy, but today is going to be different. Zira takes a deep breath, gathering all her courage. She steps out from her hiding place, her paws shaking slightly as she approaches the group. The other cubs fall silent, staring at her with wide eyes. Zira swallows hard and asks in a small voice, "Can I play too?" For a moment, there's silence. Then one of the cubs, a big male with a tuft of mane already growing, starts to laugh. The others join in, their cruel laughter echoing across the savannah. "You play with us?" the male cub sneers. "Don't you know you're not wanted here?" Zira feels her heart sink, but she stands her ground. "Please," she says, her voice barely above a whisper, "I just want to be friends." But the other cubs aren't listening. They start to circle her, calling her names, pushing her back and forth between them. "Outcast!" they yell. "Freak!" With each push, each insult, Zira feels something inside her start to crack. And then, in a moment that would change everything, one of the cubs shoves Zira hard. She stumbles, panic rising in her chest as she feels herself falling. Without thinking, Zira lashes out with her claws, trying to steady herself. There's a sharp cry of pain, and suddenly everything stops. Zira looks up to see one of the smaller cubs, a little lioness, staring at her with wide, terrified eyes. Blood trickles from 3 long scratches across the cub's face. It's like a mirror, shattering, each shard reflecting a piece of Zira's broken innocence. Time seems to stand still as everyone freezes, staring at the injured cub. Then, as if a spell has been broken, chaos erupts. The hurt cub starts to wail, a high, keening sound that cuts through the air. The other cubs back away from Zira, their faces twisted with horror and disgust. "Monster!" they yell as they flee. "Zira's a monster!" Zira stands alone, her paws covered in dust and blood, watching as the other cubs disappear into the distance. She feels something shift inside her, like a door slamming shut. The light in her eyes, that last flicker of hope and innocence, begins to dim. As the sun sets over the Pride Lands, casting long shadows across the parched earth, we see young Zira sitting alone on a rocky outcrop. Her shoulders are hunched, her head bowed low, but when she looks up, there's something different in her gaze. The spark of curiosity, the desire to belong is gone. In its place, we see the first glimmers of something darker, something harder. This was the day that changed everything for Zira. The day an innocent mistake, born from desperation and loneliness, set her on a path she could never turn back from. From this moment on, every glare, every whispered word, every act of cruelty would feed the growing darkness inside her. We watch as Zira slowly stands, her small form silhouetted against the darkening sky. She takes one last look at the Pride Lands spread out before her, at the world that has rejected her time and time again. And as she turns away, we catch a glimpse of her eyes. They're no longer the eyes of a hopeful cub, but of someone who has seen too much, felt too much pain. The Zira who walks away from that rocky outcrop is not the same one who approached those cubs with a heart full of hope. This Zira is harder, colder. The seed of bitterness has been planted, and in the harsh world of the Pride Lands, it will find plenty of nourishment to grow. But what if Zira's story didn't end there on that rocky outcrop? What if she tried one last time to prove she wasn't the monster everyone thought she was? We're about to see a slightly older Zira, and she's got a plan to change everything. She's determined to show the Pride that she's not dangerous. Zira starts helping out around the Pride, doing extra hunting and babysitting the younger cubs. At first, the other lions are wary, but slowly they start to accept her help because times are tough and they need all the help they can get. Zira begins to hope that maybe things are finally changing. She dreams about having friends and being part of the Pride for real, but then disaster strikes. One day during a big hunt, a young cub goes missing. Everyone starts searching frantically and Zira joins in, desperate to help. She searches until finally she finds the cub trapped in a deep ravine. The poor little thing is shaking with fear, its big eyes filled with tears, but Zira manages to rescue it. She's so excited to bring the cub back to its mother, but when she returns, instead of gratitude, she's met with accusations. The Pride says she must have lured the cub away to hurt it. Zira tries to explain, but no one believes her. They all start yelling and growling, saying she's a danger to the cubs. Zira's heart sinks as she realizes that no matter what she does, they'll never see her as anything but a monster. We watch as her eyes harden and her face sets into a scowl. She vows right then and there that she'll never trust anyone again. The Pride is now even more convinced that Zira is dangerous, and they start talking about driving her out for good. Zira overhears them planning to attack her and chase her away. She realizes she's in real danger and decides to leave before they can hurt her, but she's gonna make them regret ever rejecting her. Zira starts planning her revenge. She thinks about all the times they've hurt her, all the times they've pushed her away. She remembers every cruel word, every mean look, and she lets it fuel her anger. Zira decides that someday she'll come back and show them all how strong she really is. She'll make them pay for everything they've done to her. As Zira walks away from the Pride Lands for the last time, we see a whole new lion. She's not the hopeful cub anymore, or even the desperate outcast. Now, she's a lioness with a mission, and that mission is revenge. But what if Zira's story didn't end there either? What if her journey was just beginning? Because now, Zira has to figure out how to survive on her own. She has to learn how to hunt by herself, how to find water and shelter, and all the while she's getting stronger and tougher. She starts to see her outcast status as a strength instead of a weakness. Zira thinks that because she doesn't have to follow the rules of a Pride, she can do whatever she wants. She starts to dream big, imagining coming back to the Pride Lands one day with her own army of loyal followers. We meet Zira now, a young adult, cold and distant, spending most of her time alone hunting on the fringes of the Pride Lands. The light that once shone in her eyes as a cub has been replaced by a hard glint of determination. Zira's learned that the only one she can rely on is herself. One day, as she's stalking gazelles, she overhears lions talking. At first, she doesn't pay attention, but then she hears something that makes her ears perk up. They're discussing how Scar has taken over the Pride, giving power to outcasts and misfits. The low murmur of voices grows louder, building into a rallying roar that echoes across the savannah. Zira's heart pounds with excitement and fear. The lions say Scar is looking for strong, loyal followers unafraid to do whatever it takes to keep him in power. Zira's mind races, thinking about all the times she was pushed away and called a monster. The idea of turning her pain into power takes root, growing like a poisonous weed. Zira hears that Scar is holding court at Pride Rock, accepting pledges of loyalty. She moves towards Pride Rock, her steps growing more confident. As she approaches, Zira sees Scar lounging on a rocky outcrop surrounded by hyenas and scarred lions. These are the outcasts who never fit in with Mufasa's perfect pride. Zira feels a strange sense of belonging. She approaches Scar, head held high, eyes blazing with newfound purpose. Scar notes the fire in her eyes and the strength in her stance. Zira tells her story of rejection and loneliness, but doesn't ask for pity. Instead, she explains how these experiences made her strong, teaching her that survival demands ruthlessness. Scar listens, his green eyes glittering with interest. He sees in Zira a potential for cruelty born from years of rejection, recognizing a kindred spirit who understands what it's like to be an outsider. We watch as Zira finds a place where her anger is valued. Scar gives her a position of power, making her one of his top lieutenants. As Zira settles into her new role, we see her changing. The last traces of the hopeful cub disappear, replaced by a lioness who revels in cruelty. She becomes Scar's most loyal follower, enforcing his rule with savage glee. Zira's transformation is complete, like a once soft metal now forged into an unyielding blade. We leave Zira standing at Scar's side, looking out over the Pride Lands with a cold smile. She's finally found her place, but it's built on hatred and revenge. What if this was just the beginning of Zira's dark journey? What if the hatred in her heart was only starting to grow? We see Zira now fully grown and part of Scar's inner circle. She's found her place at last, standing by the side of the lion who gave her a chance when no one else would. But what if there's more to Zira's story? What if there's one last piece of the puzzle that's about to fall into place and change everything? Zira's prowling around Pride Rock when she notices an old lion stumbling towards her. He's ancient, his mane gray and patchy, his eyes clouded with age. The old lion collapses at Zira's feet, wheezing and coughing. He looks up at her with eyes full of regret and says, "I have to tell you something before I die. It's about your family, about why you were really outcast." Zira's ears perk up. The old lion struggles to speak, his voice barely a whisper. "It was Mufasa," he says. "Mufasa was the one who banished your family." Zira's mind flashes back to her cubhood, the hunger, the loneliness. The old lion continues, "There was a prophecy that said a cub from your family would one day challenge the throne. Mufasa was afraid. He chose to exile your family rather than risk his son's future reign." Zira can't believe what she's hearing. All those years of suffering, all because of Mufasa's fear? The old lion's breathing is getting shallower. "I was there," he says. "I was one of Mufasa's advisors. I tried to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't listen. He said the safety of his son and the future of the pride was more important than one family." With one last rattling breath, the old lion is gone. Zira stands there, staring at his body, her mind racing. She thinks about Simba, about how he's out there somewhere, living his life without a care in the world. What if he knew what his father had done? The injustice of it all burns inside her, fueling a growing rage. Her eyes fill with a terrible purpose as she looks out over the Pride Lands. For the first time in her life, Zira feels like she has a real purpose. It's not just about survival anymore, not just about finding a place to belong. Now it's about revenge. She's going to make Mufasa's family pay for what they did to her, even if it takes the rest of her life. What if this is the moment Zira truly becomes the villain we know from the movie? We watch as a slow, cruel smile spreads across her face. She's no longer just Scar's follower. Now she has her own reason for wanting to destroy Simba and take over the Pride Lands. Mufasa's legacy, everything he built, everything he stood for. She wants to tear it all down. And Simba, he's the key to it all. If she can destroy Simba, she can destroy everything Mufasa tried to protect. Zira's journey from innocent cub to vengeful villain warns us about how prejudice and fear can destroy lives. She started out wanting to belong, but rejection twisted her heart. What if the other lions had given her a chance instead of pushing her away? Zira's story tells us something important about how we treat others. By understanding her pain, we can learn to be kinder and more accepting. It's like when we see someone different. Do we push them away or give them a chance? Zira's story isn't just about one lioness. It's about all of us and the choices we make every day. It reminds us that kindness can change lives and everyone deserves to belong.